I've entitled this Healthy Christians, and then followed by a question, are you one of them? Now, fortunately, pardon? Yeah, the camera's on. Fortunately, in today's world, we have a lot of information. However, I find there's a lot of conflicting information as well. And so people can almost prove anything by science, which makes our job a little more difficult because different things prove different things, and they can't all be true. So it's important, I believe, for us to sort through and grasp what is really true. Now, if what I'm going to share today, because I want to share some specific things that will help toward better health, and I know some of you already are practicing these things, so it'll be a review for you, but others may not be. And if it's new to you, there's several things that I'm going to mention, and I think it's important not to get discouraged. Maybe just take one of them and make a change, and later make another change, rather than trying to do everything at once or be overwhelmed and feel like you've got to make all these changes. But I believe that life is not going to be normal anymore. As you know, COVID popped up just like that. We had no warning. Then the Ukraine pops up. They had some warning, but not a lot. And what's it going to be for this country? It's probably going to be financial troubles. Yeah. It could be something else. But we are in the last days, and people are going to need to be healthy. If you lived in the Ukraine, you're going to be better off in Ukraine if you're a healthy person than if you're not. Because, as you probably have heard, over 2.5 million people have fled Ukraine. It's not easy to flee a country in that kind of situation. So I believe God is really calling upon us. Some of us have been neglecting. Some of us have just not heard, but I felt convinced that maybe on a once-a-month basis I need to share something in regard to health. And our foundational text is the one that we read for the scripture reading, Exodus 15:26. I'll try to give you a little time to find the text since they're not on the board. There's quite a few really important points in this text if we look at it closely. Exodus 15, verse 26. If thou wilt diligently hearken. So, if we don't pay attention to what he said, can we expect the blessing? No. He says, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which is right in his sight, and wilt give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes. Notice, we have to keep them all. We can't pick and choose and think we can receive the fullness of the promise. I will put none of these diseases upon thee. Now you might wonder, why does God sound like he's putting disease on people? No, it works the opposite. He has ordained certain laws of healthful living. If we neglect those, disease comes. And so he takes the credit by saying, when you disobey, you get sick. I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. For I am the Lord that healeth thee. You know, the sad fact was that because of the period of time that they lived in Egypt, they were practicing a diet and other things very similar to what the Egyptians were doing. And if you have come either out of another church that doesn't talk about health, or if you come from the world, I think we can safely say that you have the same problem that the Egyptians had, and that even though Israel came out, that they had as well. But it ends with a very wonderful promise, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. Now in the context, he's not saying I'll heal you in disobedience, but I will heal you as you become obedient to what I have instructed you to do. In fact, here's a pretty clear statement about the whole situation. Disease never comes without a cause. How often? Never. Now, unfortunately, the medical profession today deals with the symptoms. They're not well trained to find the cause. And so they deal with the symptoms. But disease never comes without a cause. Well, doesn't it make sense that you got to find the cause and you got to remove that? The way is first prepared and disease invited by disregarding the laws of health. Now, sometimes it's not the individual that disobeyed, but it might be their parents or their grandparents or someone other than them. Maybe someone in the house was smoking, and so then they got sick from the smoke. It wasn't because they were smoking. So there are some things, but in general, sickness is caused by violating the laws of health. So in order to be healthy, then, we have to take upon ourselves the responsibility to study what the laws of health are. Because if we break them, then we get sick. Now, just thinking about the Ten Commandments, which obviously that's included in the instruction in that verse, there are 3 commandments that I would like to draw your attention to. Probably all of the commandments are broken by not practicing the health laws, because in the New Testament it says that if you break one, you break them all. But 3 of them are easy to see. For instance, if we do not practice the health laws, we are breaking the first commandment, which tells us we need to worship God and God alone. We are worshiping our taste buds or whatever else we're doing, and we're not trusting in God, and so we're breaking the first commandment. Then we are also breaking the 4th commandment, because on that particular day, we are to really be healed spiritually, and the spiritual aspect of healing is the most powerful one. Now, there are other ways we can be healed spiritually, but Sabbath is a whole day to spend with spiritual as well as physical rest and healing. And many, of course, some people are lazy, I realize today, but some people are working too hard, And if they don't take the Sabbath, then they're working 7 days a week, and as a result, their body breaks down because they're not keeping the health laws. And then perhaps the most obvious one is the sixth commandment that basically tells us don't kill anyone. Well, wouldn't that mean us? Don't kill yourself? So here we have 3 commandments that are broken when we do not keep the health laws. But in addition to that, the Bible, and we don't have time to go over those today, but the Bible has a lot of health laws. They're in the section called statutes. You remember in the text we read, it said commandments and statutes. So there are 2 aspects, and the statutes are simply explaining the 10 commandments in more detail. Number 5, we read where disease comes from disobedience. And the good news, though, is that God is the real healer. We need to look to God for healing. But we can't fully look to Him unless we're asking Him to forgive us if we're going to keep on disobeying. So, in order to be really putting our trust in God, we have to be willing to stop what we've been doing that wasn't healthy and practice that which is healthy. Now that, God allows for a failure here and there. He knows that you're really wanting to obey and you yielded to temptation and you fell. He doesn't want you to stay there, but he understands that. It's same as any other sin, that he is very patient with us until we get to the place where we will regularly obey. And the more we obey, the more He can bring the healing to us. The very first thing I do when I get sick is start analyzing. What did I do? Did I not get enough sleep in the past week or whenever? Did I eat something I shouldn't have eaten? I try to investigate what it was that I did that brought on the sickness. And with COVID, I'm not sure there was anything that brought it on. I think they doctored up that one to make it more catching. But generally, before COVID, I could always find out what it was that led to getting sick. And then, of course, it's an opportunity to make changes. A couple other promises that He made in the Bible. Exodus 23, verse 25. I'll give you a minute to get there. Exodus 23, verse 25. Might be tempting to think God can't fulfill this promise anymore because too many years have gone by. But it's still there. Exodus 23:25 says, I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. Now, this is a little bit off the subject maybe, but I don't think that too many people are giving study adequately to find out the causes of disease, and therefore we are way behind in God fulfilling this promise. But if, all the physicians were doing that, if all the nurses were doing that, all the ones in the medical field at all were doing this, God would reveal things so that this promise could still be fulfilled today. That I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. Why? God says, I change not. I'm the same person I was back then. I'm the same person today. I have the same promises to give you that, I gave back then. And another one in Deuteronomy 7:15. Deuteronomy 7:15. Here, Moses is kind of recounting for the second generation what God said to the first generation. Deuteronomy 7, verse 15. And the Lord will take away from thee all sickness, and will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which thou knowest, upon thee, but will lay them upon all them that hate thee. Now, that's not an arbitrary decision on God to say, well, you don't love me, so I'm going to make you sick. No, it's because of the disobedience. Those that don't follow God, they're not going to obey. And so they're going to get sick and have all these diseases. Another one in Jeremiah 8, verse 22. This one is God wishing that he could bring healing to them, but they're not looking to him to be healed. And so he's giving a heart cry, and I'm sure he's doing the same today because so few people know the right place to go for healing. Jeremiah 8, verse 22. He said, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is not the health of the daughter of my people recovered? Well, they're going to the wrong place to get healing. And so they're sick just like everybody else. And God is wishing that they would turn to him so that he could bring healing to them. A very interesting text in 2 Chronicles 16, verses 12 and 13. This is an example of a king who got sick, but he made a serious mistake. 2 Chronicles 16, verses 12 and 13. This, by the way, was not a godly king. And Asa, in the 39th year of his reign, was diseased in his feet until his disease was exceeding great. Yet, in his disease, he sought not to the Lord, but to the physicians. Well, what was the result of not going to the Lord, but going to the physicians? And Asa slept, or in other words, he died. He slept with his fathers and died. No, I don't think this text is saying don't ever see a physician. But what it is saying, if you read between the lines, is that Satan works hard on physicians to get them to misunderstand what to do for people. And so what they do many times makes things worse rather than better. And that's what happened to Asa. He would have been better off if he had gone to the Lord and asked him for healing instead of going to the physicians, because when he went to the physicians, they gave the wrong therapy and he ended up dying. This has happened in history over and over and over again. And it has happened as well today. I suppose some of you at least have heard that in England there was a period of time where the physicians went on strike. They wouldn't see any patients. And later, after some time went by, somebody was looking at statistics, and they discovered that less people died during that month than when the physicians were practicing. Now, that's not to condemn an individual physician who is, really seeking to heal God's way And there are some procedures, that physicians know they don't care about God at all, but they know what to do. And so again, I'm not saying don't ever go to a physician, but you better evaluate what physician you go to. I guess that's what we're saying. Because many times the treatment they give hastens your sickness or your death because they didn't know the right thing to do. And so this king made that mistake, and it's been recorded in the Bible. I wondered, what do physicians think when they read that text? And another one showing that the same idea is in the New Testament that we've been looking at in 3 John. This is just before Revelation. There are 2 little tiny books just before Revelation. 3 John and the 2nd verse. Here, John, who was the one that got the closest to Jesus, he tells us some wonderful things, and here's what he said. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health. But then he adds one more phrase, even as thy soul prospereth. Here, this makes it very clear that in order to be healthy, and we're not going to study this too much today, but just mention it, in order to be healthy physically, we have to be healthy spiritually. Because our spiritual condition and our connection with God has more to do with healing than any other aspect in our life. So, where are we going to start? This morning we're going to start at some of the issues that we have to begin with. You're familiar with the fact that Eve and then Adam fell on the area of appetite. Satan understood how easy it would be to trip up Adam and Eve on the point of appetite. And he understands how easy it is to trip us up in the area of appetite. And so we shouldn't be surprised that he attacks us in that area. Jesus, when he came to save us, when he was there in the wilderness, he had to, as the first temptation, he had to gain the victory over appetite. And he overcame it to the extreme. Matthew 4, verse 2 recounts it. You may know it by heart. But Matthew 4, verse 2 tells us how long he had to endure hunger before he could say, I have total victory over appetite. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward and hungered. Can you imagine how hungry you would be after 40 days? Jesus went without food for 40 days, and the very first temptation was, eat some food. He said, I'm not going to eat any food till my Father gives me food. That showed he had complete victory over appetite. Now, we're going to look at a definition of true temperance. It's broader than just appetite, but it certainly includes appetite. True temperance teaches us to dispense entirely with everything hurtful. So as we learn things that are harmful, we give them up. Now, Satan has found a way to make it a bigger problem for us than any other generation, because almost anything you buy in the store has some harmful aspect to it.
Yeah.
And, the Lord only expects us to do the best we can. But for one thing, and maybe we can study this at another time, for one thing, if you have some space to grow a garden, you ought to do it. Because when you grow your own food and eat your own food out of the garden, if you didn't use commercial fertilizers anyway, you have food that's as pure as you can get it. So when we discover, in general, things that are harmful, then we want to ask the Lord for help to stop using those things. But there's another part to it, and to use judiciously that which is healthful. So we can't just say, well, it's healthy to eat this and eat too much of it. So we have to learn to be careful, even with the things that are good, and we have to leave off the things that are harmful. Notice this comment on Jesus' experience. If the indulgence of appetite was so strong upon the race that in order to break its power, the divine Son of God in behalf of man was required to fast nearly 6 weeks, what a work is before the Christian in order that he may overcome even as Christ overcame. The strength of the temptation to indulge perverted appetite can be measured only by the inexpressible anguish of Christ in that long fast in the wilderness. We might be tempted to think, oh, it's no real problem. I can win over that any time of the day that I want to. But when you try to stop, you find, no, it's not that easy. I have learned several lessons. One of them, I discovered that I was allergic to sugar and honey and molasses and everything, practically, that is used to sweeten things. And so I had a choice between feeling energy all day long or wearing out by dinner time. And I chose to not wear out at dinner time and to leave off all those sweeteners. Was it easy? No. It was a battle. And still, I can fall once in a while. But I want to be healthy, and so these are things that we have to face. It's different things, probably for different people. But Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11, he gives us instruction about the things especially that are harmful to us. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 11. He doesn't list them, but he warns us. He says, "Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims." You see, this is not our home. Heaven is our home. So we're strangers on this earth. We're pilgrims on this earth. But he says, "Abstain from fleshly lusts, which war against the soul." So there's a lot more in the Bible, but that gives a good foundation for looking at some of these things. Here's a comment on that verse. "Unless we abstain from fleshly lusts, the physical nature will be brought into conflict with the spiritual nature." Can we afford from this time forward to have a conflict between our spiritual nature and our physical nature? No. The road is going to be different. As you look in the past, the good old days are gone. And we're in a battle that is intensifying, And so we cannot afford the battle between the spiritual nature and the physical nature. Lustful eating wars against health and peace. Thus, a warfare is instituted between the higher and the lower attributes of the man. The lower propensities, strong and active, oppress the soul. The highest interests of the being are imperiled by the indulgence of appetites unsanctioned by heaven. And here's the way I've come to look at it. You know, a lot of people look at what is not best for us to have as, oh, God is saying I can't do this, He's depriving me of something, oh, do I really have to give up that? Well, that's a hard road to walk, that one. But the road I've come to believe is that God is telling us all the things that are harmful to us so that we can be more healthy. And yes, it may cause a struggle, but He's there to help us win the battle against that. And in the end, we reap the benefit. We are healthier. The Lord hasn't been able to restore me to complete health, but I know this: if I had continued the way I was earlier in my life, I would never have reached the age I am now. And so it does pay off.
Amen.
Health, character, and even life are endangered by the use of stimulants. So we're going to look at stimulants just a little bit for a few minutes. Stimulants which excite the exhausted energies to unnatural spasmodic effort. Now, the Bible tells us that Satan is a liar and the father of it. So, he has introduced into most people's diet and into their practices stimulants. And a stimulant lies to your body. It tells you that you have energy that you don't have. And so this is why it's best really to leave those aside. Condiments are injurious in their nature. And then it lists some of them. Now, if you are using some of these things, I'm not criticizing you, I'm just telling you a better way. Mustard, pepper, spices, pickles. Now, there are pickles that are okay to eat, but you've got to look at the ingredients in them. So mustard, pepper, spices, pickles, and other things of a like character irritate the stomach and make the blood feverish and impure. Now, you might be aware of it or you might not be, but it does it whether you're aware of it or not. And that's the reason it's better to leave those things aside. As soon as the immediate effect is gone, the system sinks down below par, as much as it was elevated above par. So the stimulant makes us think we're better off, but once it wears off, we're worse off than what we were before. This is the effect of the use of mustard, pepper, and spices, and it adds 2 more, tea and coffee. Now, it's not talking about herb tea. Many of the herb teas are healthful, but here's one thing we got to be careful about. Don't think that because something is called an herb, it's okay. You see, there's a lot of the medications that have herbs in them too, but they're harmful. So we have to know that it's an herb that is beneficial before we can consider it safe. So here's the list we're looking at today, the complete list: mustard, pepper, spices, tea, and coffee. those all have that unfortunate effect. Under the head of stimulants and narcotics is classed a great variety of articles that altogether used as food or drink irritate the stomach, poison the blood, and excite the nerves. Their use is a positive evil. Men seek the excitement of stimulants because, for the time, the results are agreeable. But there is always a reaction. The use of unnatural stimulants always tends to excess. So, this is one of Satan's real desires, is that we get hooked on some of these things. And as a result, we find it hard to stop. The use of unnatural stimulants always tends to excess, and it is an active agent in promoting physical degeneration and decay. We're maybe the last generation. We are the worst as far as being able to get sick of any other generation, and we really need all the help we can get. Tea acts as a stimulant and to a certain extent produces intoxication. The action of coffee and many other popular drinks is similar. Again, you've got to watch the ingredients because like Coca-Cola has caffeine in it as well. They got these energy drinks out now, they got caffeine. You've got to watch what's in it because this is being used for those that run the business to make money, of course. That's their desire. And if you're hooked, then they're going to make more money. The first effect is exhilarating. The nerves of the stomach are excited. These convey irritation to the brain. And this in turn is aroused to impart increased action to the heart and short-lived energy to the entire system. The body does what the brain says. And if the brain thinks you've got energy, it tells your body you have it. But the problem is you don't have it. And it explains why you don't have it. Because of these results, many suppose that their tea or coffee is doing them great good. But this is a mistake. Tea and coffee do not nourish the system. Their effect is produced before there has been time for digestion and assimilation. You see, we have to get energy from what we eat. And the tea and coffee are the kind of tea that this is talking about. It gives you the energy before any digestion has occurred. Their effect is produced before there has been time for digestion and assimilation. And what seems to be strength is only nervous excitement. When the influence of the stimulant is gone, the unnatural force abates, and the result is a corresponding degree of languor and debility. So, picks you up seemingly, but it drops you down. And so you're actually worse off. And there, of course, is an end to that road to where you drop down in a serious way. The continued use of these nerve irritants is followed by headache, wakefulness, palpitation of the heart, indigestion, trembling. I know none of us would like those things, but are we willing to pay the price so that we don't get them? Tired nerves need rest and quiet instead of stimulation and overwork. So when our nervous energy is low, it's not going to really help the situation to take these stimulants to pick us up. But instead, rest. That's what's going to do it. Nature needs time to recuperate her exhausted energies. When her forces are goaded on by the use of stimulants, more will be accomplished for a time, but as the system becomes debilitated by their constant use, it gradually becomes more difficult to rouse the energies to the desired point. So it eventually gets to where it doesn't do what it did in the beginning. Finishing this train of thought, the demand for stimulants becomes more difficult to control until the will is overborne and there seems to be no power to deny the unnatural craving. So as the process keeps on going, it gets to where we can't stop. We want to stop. Maybe we found out we should stop, but we can't stop because we have weakened our willpower and our spiritual side of our nature to where we can't seem to change. Now, I believe God will give more help when a person wakes up and helps them. People have recovered from tremendous addictions, but we should not presume on that. We should, as soon as we learn about the danger of these things, we should start making a change. Stronger and still stronger stimulants are called for until exhausted nature can no longer respond. In closing, I want to draw your attention to 1 Corinthians 6, verses 19 and 20. This, I believe, is the marching orders of the Christian, because we are very special to God. 1 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20. Paul says, what? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? He comes on as a surprise. You know what? Don't you realize that you are a temple for the God of the universe? He wants to live in you. And he paid for you on Calvary. He died so that he could own you. And you are a temple. Well, if we're a temple for God to live in, then we're motivated to do only that which is healthful. Whatever we know. To be unhealthful, we want to get rid of, because we want to live completely healthy. For ye are bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. And one of the great benefits we have is that it makes it easier to live the spiritual life. It makes it easier to have overcome sickness or not even get sick. There are so many benefits to us, but the primary benefit really is the spiritual benefit that it is to us, because the body and the mind and the spiritual part of the mind especially are very close together. What affects one affects the other. And that's why John said, you know, I'm really eager for you to be healthy, but also that you'll be healthy spiritually as well as physically, and each will help the other, and you will be able to go through the last times of Earth's history.